This is episode 33 of Hoops Forum, a production of Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. He's Randy Sherman. I'm Tony Miller. And on today's show, we'll be talking playing without play calls, as well as some of the other best actions for your playbook this season. Before we get going, a big thanks to our sponsors over at 323 Sports. Basketball season right around the corner. And if there's anything left that you still have need of ordering, they have basketballs, scorebooks, anything, t-shirts. 323 Sports can get it to you on time and at a great price. To find out more about what they can do for your basketball program, visit 323sports.com, or you can contact a rep at sales@323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your sports program. Randy, as coaches start shifting their full attention, I know a lot of them are involved in other things. They're athletic directors and setting up for football and volleyball, but now they're really starting to think about basketball. Full attention is given to their basketball seasons, and maybe they're going through their playbooks. They might be adding new plays, replacing old plays.
Yeah.
What are some of the general suggestions that you have for coaches as we approach this season?
I'm keeping it 100 today, man. So I think these thoughts that I'm about to share sort of stem from recent conversations I've had with coaches who, like you mentioned, are getting in that mode. And, I'm talking to this coach, that coach, all separately and sometimes together, but I'm hearing a lot of the same things, so some general suggestions as practices near, or maybe for some people listening, they've already begun. And the season nears is one suggestion would be it's time to decide, then delete. Decide, then delete. So I talked to a lot of coaches who've maybe been consuming a lot of things during the off season and practice is nearing and they're kind of like, what do you think? Should I do? Like, pick whatever you think, coach, but it's time to do that. It's time to decide, that's just the first step. And then delete, which would be like, okay, make a commitment. This is our path forward. This is what's going in the season, and this is what's not, and like, forget about it. Like it's gone. And so like the time to consume, there's a season for everything, and like consumption season's probably over. It's time to synthesize what's going to be presented to our team, just like Men in Black style, like erase from our memory what's not going to be presented to our team, and then proceed, right? So I'd say secondly, what I've been working on with a lot of coaches even this morning was like sort of crafting an implementation plan. Okay, like we've decided, we've deleted, this is what's going in, what's my implementation plan? Whether that's planning out practices in sort of like a curriculum style of like, this is going in first, this is going in next, like that's kind of what I'm talking about, deciding what order things are going to be implemented and why, and understanding, this builds upon that, or this needs to be first and this follows with that. Like that's what we're talking about. Thirdly, I would say that a general suggestion that I hear this a lot from coaches is like, coach, here's what I've got. We start practice, I don't know, let's say October 20th. Our first game is like November 8th. Do you think I can get this all in that? And I push back on that a little bit, and I say, like, your first game date is a false deadline. Like your first game date is a completely arbitrary deadline to say I've got to have everything in. I mean, I'm assuming you're going to keep practicing through the season. I'm assuming you're going to convene with your players between game 1 and game 2, and you might, okay, well, we need to work on that again, or we need to expand on that a little bit. But like this idea that our first game date is some sort of like date that by which we've got to get everything in is, to me, very arbitrary. And I would say if you're really that worried about it, that's probably a good red flag that you're considering too much information. Like if you do feel like I've got to get everything in by my first date, and I don't think I can, then you probably, you should probably like that's then why are we bothering with this much stuff, right? But I would say, that first game date is not hard and fast deadline. Um, I would think of it in terms of like, you and I both being content creators, like there's this concept we call dripping content. Like I could write a 1,500 word blog that no one's going to read because it's way too long. Or I could say, hey, this is first in a series, right? So I think coaches can borrow that idea of like, hey, this is what we're going to install first. This is what I want my players to understand, primarily what we're going to focus on during the training camp phase, if you will, of our practice season. And as we get deeper into the season, I might expand upon that. I might drip more content to my team. That idea of dripping content rather than sending out that 1,500 word blog that no one's going to read. I can turn that into 3 posts that, hey, follow up coming up in volume 2. Same thing with players. Like, this is our basic offense. It may be more intricate, possibly in a month, in 2 months, because I'm withholding some content that I'm going to introduce to you when there's readiness. I'd say lastly is fit things together with a theme. Like, have a theme with your team that let me rephrase that. Have a theme with your playbook that, like, this is our identity, and this is and things that go into this playbook really only fit with that. I'd look for outliers, like this is just from a different shape, or this doesn't this is some play I like, or some slob or blob I like, but like, at its termination point, it doesn't really fit with what we do. So like I can like it and also not use it, right? Like, I don't have to use it. It needs to sort of fit with our theme. So those are some general suggestions for this time of year that I would say could help you prepare.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great. Yeah, I mentioned in the introduction playing without play calls, and to that last point that you just gave there with your playbook, I wonder what coaches hear and think when they hear that phrase. Some of them may, scary, pipe
Mm-hmm.
dream, aspirational,
Mm-hmm.
our goal, maybe a combination of those words, maybe
Yeah,
even
some just
coming.
aren't interested, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Some's like, I'm not interested in that. Like, yeah.
right. Right. So like what does playing without play calls, what does that mean for you?
I guess what it means for me is, like, we in this program have a style of play, and we practice in a manner that makes me, the coach, increasingly unnecessary. Like, at the beginning of the year, or say my first year, my first practices at a new job, or my first head coaching job, or something like that, I'm pretty necessary to my team as I present this information to them. But for me personally, my override, and I understand that on the front end, but for me personally, my motive, if you will, as we go on through the season, through seasons, is to make myself increasingly unnecessary. I have the knowledge, I have the vision at first. My motive is to impart that upon my players, to where the way they see the game becomes the way I see the game. The way I see the game becomes the way they see the game. And that sort of like disconnection between player and coach shrinks. We're the same. We see things the same. We approach it the same. So my motive, I think there are a lot of coaches who don't have that motive. They don't want to make themselves unnecessary, right?
Mhm.
They want to be the solution to every problem. Do what I say, or run it like this, or like that. Like that. That's not their motive. I wanted the motive to be almost like I'm raising a child. Like, my goal is to raise a good adult if I'm a parent. So
Mhm.
I make myself increasingly unnecessary. When they're a baby, I'm highly necessary. But as they become older, I'm less necessary.
Mhm.
Um, so I would put a finer point on what you have there at the bottom. Playing without play calling would be, what we're not talking about is, we're not talking about playing without structure. We're not talking about playing roll the balls out, or playground ball or something like that. We're calling, what we're saying, we mean, is means playing without calls. Like, the players have ownership. They they're the ones. I'm in khakis on the sideline, right? So they're the ones on the court. They need the ownership.
Mhm.
So that's where we're going with this. Not playing without structure or roll the balls out. It's we practice in a manner that builds a style of play that the players can take ownership of.
I have found that my role has changed in this type of coaching. It's not that you're not necessarily, the result is not necessarily that you're useless as a coach. It's just that
No,
you have a different role. And I
sure.
think it allows for additional opportunities for feedback. I'm able to change my attention from playing chess to telling somebody that wasn't as great of a move as you could have made. Let's
Hmm.
make this move instead. And so I have found that it's almost more fun that way because of the nature of basketball again, how we've talked about the messiness in it. And so you end up helping them learn how to address their own problems within the game.
Hmm.
And I found it to be more fun than even the chess piece of we're going to come down and run this horns play. And hey, my play, while you may feel great about yourself because your horns play worked, what ends up happening when the team takes away your horns play or takes away whatever the action is, then you're kind of that's when we lose games. And
Hmm.
so playing from this conceptual nature has had multiple benefits. We'll come back and talk about the benefits a little bit
Yeah,
later. For
sure.
somebody that may no, a lot of us I know people that probably are listening to this and follow the both of us are already familiar with this. But again, what I have found is they are always looking for better ways to go about implementing this and teaching this and just becoming better at helping their players learn how to play without play calls. So
Yeah.
that's my next question is how do you go about instituting this kind of offense?
The all important first step would be that it's your goal and that we practice this way. That that my goal or is for us to sort of be able to do this on our own without coach intervention or coach interjection, especially into live play, right? So that means we have to practice in a certain way that doesn't feel, say, maybe like a dress rehearsal or running through routines. We have to practice in a way that is slightly different, and it has to be our goal. Like this is what I want. If it's not what you want, you're not going to, you know, uh, pursue that. But so I'd say there are many ways to get to that point. You already mentioned one. It would be it'd be pivot toward a more motion or conceptual style offense, like where we're playing without plays doesn't mean we're playing without structure. It just means sort of we begin with a spacing template, like we're 4 out, 5 out. These are our spots, and then we have a list of concepts that we adhere to. That they might come out sounding like do's and don'ts, like pass, and when you pass you cut here, and like so the concepts are sort of like the laws, if you will, that govern over our play, and my role as the coach is sort of to be the policeman of those concepts of like, like, hey, here's our spacing template, here's like a list of our 5 main concepts: pass, screen for the guy below you. Something could sound like a lot of things, like motion style, pass, cut, drive double gaps, stay out of single gaps, whatever. That, like, our do's and don'ts are sort of like the laws governing the land, and I'm sort of the person who looks over that and sees that our players adhere to those or don't. And when they don't, I point it out. When they do, the possession ends up looking how we want it to look. Um, so I would say either that's one way. Another way would be to sort of say have an offense that sort of has enough heft to stand alone, like we're probably something like Princeton or something that can be very multiple. That's like our way of playing, but it can exist without calls. For example, I just let the ball call the play, right? So we teach our players to transition a certain way, and as we're transitioning into the from defense to offense, we don't know what we're going to run. I'm not hollering it out from the sideline, but what we get into is based on where the ball goes. Does the point guard hit the wing? Does the point guard hit the trail? Does the point guard keep it and get a drag screen sit for him or her? Like all of those things sort of unlock what the possession is going to get to next, and so on and so forth. I call that letting the ball call the play. Just like, I don't know, like, I think of an example might be like North Carolina secondary break. They run to these spots, but and the guy's bringing the ball, and if they throw ahead, they run wing option. If they hit the trail man, they run pass reversal. If they that's a very common way, and that again, that's not playing without structure. The secondary break is the structure. Our passing and cutting game is the structure. Our Princeton series and entries is the structure, but I'm not calling it. We're just reacting to where the ball goes.
Mhm.
So that would be another way to let the ball call the play. Um, I think the third way, I think when I was early in my coaching career, ran a lot of motion offense, was influenced with people like Bob Knight and Rick Majerus, and like what they would tell you is like, why do I need to call a play? All we run is motion offense. Like, what are you looking at me for? This is the way we play in this gym. Just do it. Like, why there is nothing to call when you only have one way of playing, right? Like, so like, Coach Knight's teams, he didn't call things. Like they went down and ran their concepts, their screening rules, their spacing alignment they began with, and their screening rules that came out sounding a lot like do this, not that. When this happens, you read your defense and do this or this. Like, that's what motion offense or a conceptual style offense is. It's a spacing template married with some do's and don'ts, and you just practice it day after day. It's like there's no reason to look to coach to call anything. Like, this is all we do in this gym. So that's the easiest way to play without calls, is like, we have one option. So why are you looking at me? Like, I'm not calling anything else, because this is how we play. And sort of restrict yourself to that style. So that'd be my tips on how to go about it.
Yeah, communicating to the players to help them understand what we're trying to accomplish here is something that I've been thinking a lot about this year, and it's what we've said for years is great offense. It's spacing, which is typically starts with your alignment. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole episode devoted to that Randy and I have several months back, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's ball movement on the bounce, attacking space, or with the pass to find an advantage. And then it's player movement based off of where the ball is. I create space to give the ball room to breathe, and I get in a location so the ball can find me, what you just said there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's preaching to them over and over and over: spacing, correct ball movement, and correct player movement. And again, I've just been trying to think as much about how can I make this simple for my players to understand that we're not just running plays. And I think, again,
Yeah.
most of the coaches that are probably listening to us have been following for a while now, and they know that plays are not the end all, because there are limitations to those. But again, they don't necessarily know how to communicate it to our players. And so
Yeah.
can I simply put it in those terms and then teach them whatever the patterns are, like you said, whatever you want to run. The goal is, I think the goal changes. The goal goes from running plays to scoring the basketball, which sounds silly, but the ultimate goal is I want to create an advantage and then either score it by myself, or again, let the ball find the open advantage. And then for us to use our player skills of shooting
Mm-hmm.
and finishing to finish the possession off and win the game.
Yeah.
And man, it just sounds so simple when it comes out of my mouth. And it has been a process of like 3 years of listening to you and some of the other guys that I
Mm-hmm.
really have learned a lot from to make it simple for my guys.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, all right. From that perspective of the benefits, I think I
Mm-hmm.
just included some of those. But what have been some of the benefits that you found, both for your overall system and then the
Mm-hmm.
benefits for the players too, to become better basketball players?
Yeah, I would say the main benefit, um, and I've already mentioned this once, would be the gap between player and coach closes, or gets close to closing. Like, there, you know, you're a coach. You're passionate about this. You study it. You're an adult you've made a career out of this, and you're coaching young people who've not been around the game as long as you. So there exists a gap between your knowledge of the game and theirs. And it may be this big. If you're watching, I've got my hands separated by about a foot or so, right? Like, so at the beginning of the season, or when you first get hired on at a new place, that gap may be great, especially for the way you want the game played, between the player's knowledge and your job is to close that gap. Um, I think that's a good goal. Is like I want the players to see the game the way I do, and close that gap between us, my thinking about the game and theirs. Coaches who maybe aren't interested in a conceptual playing without play style, they're okay with that gap existing. Like, I know you just do it, you just adhere, and there's lots of good teams that exist that way. Um, for I would equate that to my wife. She's always amazed. I'm not bragging, but she's amazed that like I can speak Spanish, right? And I'm like, well, I had Spanish class, didn't you? Right? It's like, yeah, I had Spanish class. I got an A in it. Well, yeah, you just passed the class. You didn't learn anything, right?
Mhm.
So like just doing what I say is almost like just get the grade, just pass the assignments, just do the thing. But like you didn't learn the game. So it's that cliche of learning to play rather than run plays. I'd say another benefit is give ownership to the players. They're the ones out there. I'm in khakis. They're out there having to deal with the live bullets, the stimulation of the game. So it gives ownership to them. I would say, and you've already touched on this, it's a fun way to coach. It's rewarding to see players learn. Um, I'm assuming probably next you'll ask me about some warnings or some downsides. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, yeah. If you're ready, go for it.
Um, this is I don't make many guarantees, but this is one I will make. If you're going to be pivot from a coach who's like very play driven, run the play, run the offense, joysticking the deal, like from the sidelines, and you're like, yeah, I want to do this. Um, it Again, I don't make many guarantees. This is one I will. It will be ugly on the front end. Not might be, not it might be ugly, coach. Like, no, it will be ugly on the front end. And in a way, that's your fault. Like, if it's like, if I was a very strict parent, right, and I kept my child, super strict rules, and then they get a little bit of freedom and just kind of like don't know how to deal with it. I kind of ask for that, right? Like, I kind of ask for that. So I think it will be ugly in proportion to your level of joystickiness prior to that. Like, if you're super joysticky and you want to go this way, it's going to be really ugly, because while you may have some players who look like basketball players, who dress like them, who play the game, like when you give them this level of freedom, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. So if you can't deal with a little bit of ugliness on the front end, like, just scroll past, right? I would say this sounds like something that all players would like, right? Like all players. This is another warning would be, you would think that a player would like, I want to just play, coach. Like, I found there was some players who really didn't like playing without, like, I had to like kind of like, they wanted to be told what to do. They wanted the structure, and they felt like kind of lost out there without it, and didn't like the way that felt. And then my last warning would be, like, even if we're conceptual and we're playing without plays and we're letting the ball call the play, or however that's going to look for you, your team can still fall into habits. I remember one time I asked for a scouting report from a coach who eliminated my team in the playoffs. I knew the coach, and I was like, hey, I'm sure you did a scouting report on us. We're out. Y'all are advancing. Congratulations. I want to know, when you watched my team play, what did you see? And even though we were a, kind of let the ball call the play type team, in I think it was a female coach actually, in her notes was, they always do this. They almost always blankety blank. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Like, we have these habits, and that playing this way is supposed to move you away from those. That's one of the arguments you'll hear coaches say for playing emotion conceptions, like we're unpredictable, or you can really kind of fall into habits as a team. And I felt like my job as a coach was to sort of like be on the lookout and keep my finger on the pulse of those habits, and be like, we need to hit the wing more. We need to reverse more. We need we're just too much pass and screen, need to, it's somehow ended up looking like a structured pattern type thing when that's really not its intent. So
Mhm.
those are some warnings that even though you're moving this direction, your team kind of can get comfortable with certain things, and just like, even though you're not calling it, it's what's happening way too often.
I have found that, again, they end up, even in conceptual offense, they will end up running a play rather than seeing what's in front
Yep,
of them and reacting based off of that.
absolutely.
And I try to make it simple for them to understand. They often forget the point of the game is to get buckets.
Hmm.
And it just again becomes passing around the perimeter or running to the same spot all the time. And like you said, that's not the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, and if I
Um,
notice that on film, like I'm watching our play and it's like, man, we're kind of, yeah, like we just dribble handoff to the guy below us like 5 possessions in a row. Like then I would, I've, I would hope I can kind of address that in the moment, in timeout, halftime, between quarters, etc. Um, but if I didn't, I can address that in practice by using some restrictions in practice, like, hey, we're going to play 4v4 change, but I'm restricting you from using dribble entry or whatever, because like we're leaning on that. So I'm like sort of like asking them to sort of get into some different habits that are maybe the ones that are sort of top of mind right now, and over time we get more multiple as a result.
yeah, that's good. All right, last big question here. You've said this before, but there are a lot of coaches who think that more is better. And in reality, what they possess is probably enough to win them games
Sure.
and maybe even win them championships. And so, this balance between just kind of throwing out everything, Coach Randy said, for me to just play conceptually versus, what do I need in this
Hmm.
playbook? I have some plays here, but what do you consider essential? And then at what point are we kind of overdoing things?
Yeah, I have this phrase I call outlining the game. And how you I think it's important for a coach to decide what model they're going to use to outline the game. And like, think of Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, like an actual outline, right? Like, how do you organize the game in your head? So what would be essential to me is, like, let's look at the 4 phases of the game: transition offense to transition defense to defense. So if we're talking about what's absolutely just the bare minimum essential, is like, I kind of want to coach the way we transition, connect that to our offense. What are we going, what's the, what are we going to teach in transition defense, and then recovering back into our base defense. And I can feel like, at least on the front end, again, first game's not a deadline, that I can subsist on one big thing for each of those phases, right? Like, this is our transition offense. Not sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. It's this one thing. And it connects with our half court offense, which is this. And we have a few options that we begin our possession with, but like, outlining the game helps me arrive at a minimum that I need. Another way I sometimes outline the game is making a dividing line between live ball and dead ball when we begin a possession. So if we get a defensive rebound, that's a live ball beginning to the possession. If we force a turnover, that's a live ball beginning of the possession. If we get scored upon, um, opponent makes a layup or hits a three, we get scored upon, that is a live ball change of possession. So in those moments, I'm sort of like leaning on our transition offense. Like, I'm not calling anything. Um, so I need those essential things, um, to subsist, because during live play, we're just going to use those 4 things, our 4 major tactical frameworks in each one of those 4 phases. Dead ball, there's possessions that don't begin in a live fashion. We're on defense, the other team double dribbles, we get the ball back, they're back, their defense is set. I need at least some sort of package, maybe to sort of kickstart an advantage in those situations. So I would say something to be thinking about in your preseason planning is, how are we going to begin those possessions that don't start with flow and thrust that's inherent when we change possession live ball. We obviously probably going to play zone or man, so we need to at least, have that something to begin the season with that addresses when we come down into offense. We might see man, we might see zone. So that's a bare minimum thing to me, a zone offense. If we were to move this conversation over to drilling, what's essential in practice would be the first thing I tried to do was just like eliminate redundancy in our drilling, like how to get down to the essential. Like we don't need like 5 different wing closeout drills because we're just drilling the same thing, right? And like we can do that in one way, first at least, right? And then I'd say things that don't fit. We already talked about having a theme. If things that don't fit with that theme that I'm going to have with our packages aren't essential to me in this gym. They might be in someone else's, but they don't make it into this gym.
I think that most coaches probably have too much in their playbook. And even the categories that you mentioned, there are 3 zone offenses or 3 zone defenses or 5. Like, I don't know that you need any more than 5 or 8 out of bounds plays. And I do think that coaches or the players probably can memorize and remember more things. But
Sure.
then you go to the more things than we think that they can. But then you go to the extreme again. What's your overall philosophy? Do I want to play more out of concept, or do I want to be joysticking everything? And
Yeah.
you will end up going back to, I'm saying this from experience, you'll go back to whatever you're most comfortable with if you leave yourself the option of going back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And typically that is going back to more plays. So anyways, just some random thoughts there. So a lot of the stuff that you just talked about are, you mentioned at the beginning, conversations that you've had with your coaches, and your coaches exist in your ramp program. And this year at the beginning of the season, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of direct people towards where they can find out more about that, because I'm getting it kind of for free because I get
Yeah.
to talk with Randy every weekend.
No,
Um,
it's good.
but these are things that regular meetings that he will have, and I won't steal all your thunder. Can you tell them what's available, and then also where they can find out more about those resources?
I would say what's available would be just sort of my eyes and ears, and the eyes and ears of some other coaches that I, have kind of formed in a community. Uh, I'd say the best way to learn about it is reach out to me, radiusathletics.com, contact form. You can email me, Randy at Radius Athletics, DM me on Twitter. But, I would say that, like, you've already mentioned this, is like, if a coach is really interested in playing this way and they've been following me for longer than a month, like, they're either a member already or they're just not interested. So not interested, because I've been pretty consistent over the years of like, if you want to learn more about how to play this way, here's how to. I put it at the bottom of every blog post, tweets, things like that periodically. Try not to be over the top, but like, if you want to play this way, and you want me to teach you, maybe you want someone else to teach you, I can recommend tons of people that can do that. You being one of them. That if you're interested in learning to play this way, you're either probably already connected with me or you're just not into it. Sorry. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
If a thing like, yeah, it costs a little bit of money, if that's a hold up to you, then you're, okay.
I would even say, though, for that group, something that I would encourage those that are thinking about doing something like this, it gives you another assistant coach
Sure.
without the assistant. If you can't afford or can't find somebody like that, the additional eyes and ears that Randy can watch film with you or give you feedback on things, or just as a younger coach, having somebody that's older. And I would say beyond well, who's this guy? If somebody happens upon this that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know who Randy Sherman is, it's something where
Nobody.
it's as valuable that he has had the connections and the interactions with literally hundreds of coaches and has been gaining information from them as well as giving
Mm-hmm.
information from them. Um, in addition to the fact that he's been a coach for years as well. And I think that's a different perspective, which is why, going back to why we even started this, I wanted to do something with Randy, because I can talk to another coach that's coaching, or I can talk to somebody who coaches coaches. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably the most valuable asset that Randy can provide for you there. So be sure to go check out all of that. Before we wrap things up, do want to talk and think about our sponsors at Sideline Interactive. Their scores, tables, and scoreboards are awesome and will improve your gym. They will help raise you literally thousands of dollars, the potential to help raise you thousands of dollars. They're in your gym on the sidelines with advertisements and sponsorships. But you can find out more about Sideline Interactive at sidelineinteractive.com, and they will set you up with something that will, like I said, make your gym look even better than I'm sure it already does. Appreciate all of you who joined us this week. If by chance you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and watch that at Radius Athletics on YouTube. Just simply search Hoops Forum and Radius Athletics, or you can go to any podcast platform, type in a quick timeout, and there you'll find the audio version of the show as well. Thank you so much to all of you who joined us this week. We'll be back again next week on Hoops Forum.